So we were just discussing how we've got two of our members here, and we want to try to increase participation at these meetings, and so I think we're probably going to look at moving to a virtual format in the future, and see if that gets us better participation. I'm also going to send out a survey to our members just asking their level of willingness to continue to serve. It has been 2 years since we started the committee, so some folks might just be ready to roll off, or maybe are no longer interested in serving, and so we'd be interested in finding some new folks too, if people aren't interested in serving anymore, so we can get plenty of participation at these meetings. So given that we just have the two folks here, we want to do a quick overview of the 2023 budget, and then we'll save the 2022 accomplishments sort of year in review until our virtual meeting in January, when hopefully more folks can join and we can have a really robust discussion about that at that time. Yeah. So I'm going to turn it over to Gray. If you want to just let me know if you want me to skip any slides as we go through this in a more abbreviated fashion.
And before Greg gets started, how would you like your inquiries as we going or towards the end?
Just throughout is fine.
Throughout.
Yeah,
Perfect.
make it interactive. We'll happy to answer anything we can. So Gray Lewis, I'm a CFO. Happy to be here with y'all to just explain our budget for fiscal 23. We're right towards the tail end of the process. We're legally required to present a balanced budget to our F&A committee, which we did this week, and then the board will be meeting next week, and we have to have a legally balanced budget. On the next slide, it talks a little bit about meaning our net revenues have to serve our debt. So we're SWBNO, water, sewer, drainage, 3 separate systems that we account for, have to budget for separately. So we do this in a sort of a consolidated manner, and then allocate or prorate our monies to each of those independent divisions. There's 7 divisions, which Ghassan's leadership brought customer service as his own division. Renee Gonzalez being the head of that, and over 227 departments across the agency. So all that ends up like over 3,000 line items that we're budgeting for our operating and maintenance expenses, and all that gets built up. Typical budget process from the bottom up, and then we work within our debt covenants in order to basically spend what we need to, and then try and preserve other funds for capital. And the bottom part here is really just getting into the revenue outlook, which has been discussed in our initial rate study discussions and meetings. That water and sewer, we're in the 2023 will be the 3rd year of basically no rate increase, and with the customer, there's no growth in customer accounts based on this city, the community. So we're really basically flat with maybe a small 1% increase expected. Drainage is coming up a little bit in 2023, about 6% increase based on the certified tax roll, but it had decreased, of course, after COVID and then after Ida. So we're kind of recouping a little bit there. So let's go to the next slide, Tyler. So this was just some of the discussions we had internally. I won't go into each of these, but all about wisely spending the public's money and being as efficient and accountable to each other. And then on the capital side, we have several legacy projects that are either in process or getting kicked off with the smart metering, the power complex. The groundbreaking was this week, so a lot of exciting projects going on, a lot of things to budget for. So we went through the normal process where we do get more requests than we can satisfy, but working with leadership have to prioritize things. So we'll take a look at the numbers. I think on the next, this is just the revenue picture describing what, or showing graphically what was talking about relatively flat since the last year. 2020 was the last year of the scheduled 8 years of rate increases. And then going on to the next slide. This is a snapshot of what we recommended for our 2023 budget. So that 236.5 million in the middle is the total O&M, about 5.6% higher than last year's. The drivers there, the personnel costs is going up because of the mandatory city increase across the board, the agency on salaries, and also our utilities and commodity pricing is going up on the market because of market conditions, and our Entergy bill, that's a large expense for high pressure gas and electricity costs. The debt service, the next big cash expenditure, is up a little bit, 51.2 million. We just closed on a drainage tax bond. It's allowing the power complex project to fund several additional contracts. And then the last line is what we call pay-go for capital, which is any residual funds we earmark, set aside for cash financing of our needed capital projects, which we'll see in a little bit. It's quite a few projects that have been deferred, but we continue to put them on a list. So let's go to the next slide. This is just breaking it out by the three systems that I mentioned: water, sewer, drainage, and then also adding in some additional non-cash expenses. We have retiree medical plans, which is OPEB, other post-employment benefit plans, and then the pension plan, which is a very significant benefit and actuarially determined, but also costly, but something we provide employees to work here at Sewage and Water Board.
Can I ask about the strategy of this equitable distribution of the OPEC across all three systems?
It's ratably 1/3 spread across based on the employees working in the different water, sewer, drainage.
So it's actual. It's not like an accounting strategy that you develop. It's based on the actual pensions that's coming from each.
Right. Yeah, we set up an approximation of splitting that cost 3 ways based on all of our workforce. Typically works. Some of the people in the field work specifically on one thing, but other people work on all three, or like here in corporate, we work on all three.
Yeah.
But overall, the pension and OPEB are split just in a 1/3.
It just pops out because it's like the exact numbers across the board.
Yeah, that's because the actuaries figure the number for the whole plan, and we've chosen to allocate it this way. Any other questions? We'll go to the next. I think breaks it out by our divisions, and this again is all those line items rolling up into the various different divisions. So that's the same 236.5 million, and then the total down at the bottom, 410. So let's look at the next slide, please. This is same type of, this the same numbers, just presented differently, where we divide our costs into the major direct costs. Personnel is the top, service and utilities, all the services we have to acquire or pay, or actual utility costs we pay, and then other types of overhead costs are all adding to the same 236. And then line 9, I guess I could mention, is one that's changed, been able to estimate a lower amount of provision for doubtful accounts because of we've resumed collections in the normal shutoff policy, and we're talking about that historically for really 20, 21, 22, we had that very high 30.3 million because customers weren't paying because there was no collections enforcement. Now we've had a full year of sort of normal collections, and so we're able to estimate a lower expense. So that's the 13.2 million of lower expense you're seeing there.
So the revenue is estimated based on everybody's paying, and then you subtract out how much you expect to.
Yeah. So
not
top
get
line
paid.
would be your billed revenue, and then once
Gotcha.
you take out your provision for doubtful accounts, you're getting to like an estimate of collected.
Gotcha.
revenue.
Gotcha.
That's right.
Does revenue ever move to maybe a bad debt where you actually lost it and you won't won't collect it?
I want to close an account permanently, and it ages like 2-3 years. We do a permanent write-off.
Who do you go for to make up for that loss? Do you go to the city or the state?
There's really no way to recoup that
Yeah.
under the current laws, so it's just lost revenue.
Would you like to see a change in that area?
That's yeah, it's an interesting concept. I think some other communities and cities you see that type of filler, if you will, if there's a backstop whereby the city or someone else would basically fill in that revenue. I mean, that would be great for us, because right now we're taking the credit risk that customer never pays, moves away, and then that ultimately has to get paid by the current ratepayers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think something else we've talked about in other places is that the water bills are associated with the property rather than with the owner. And so then oftentimes the utility can place liens on property for those unpaid bills, so that then there is at least a sort of legal mechanism to, at some point down the line, hopefully collect on that revenue.
Have that been mentioned outside of this room to a council individual or council as a whole?
I mean, in this case, it would take a state legislative change, I think, but, I mean, we've, I think, informally discussed it, but I don't think that we've gone anywhere near a formal proposal to make that happen.
You don't see it as significant to, relative to other ask?
I would say it's on the list. I mean, there's each year, legislative things we talk about,
Okay.
so it's definitely on the list. Yes.
Gotcha. Interesting.
So let's look at the next slide.
Yep.
This is just a calculation showing this concept of pay-go cash financing. So we want to preserve as much of our revenues that we get to collect to spend on deferred capital, basically on capital projects. So it's 43.3 million that we're estimating for 2023. Then we'll go to the next one. This is just a snapshot on the personnel side, our positions. We currently have 1,587 positions in the budget. Those right now is filled is closer to about 1,200. So there's about 337 that if you think about it, we may have a hiring plan in place. So there's a calculation, either you fund it at 100% if the hiring's sort of already done, or if it's not yet contemplated, only a 25% figure for actual funding. But we're certainly faced with the challenges all companies in the community with hiring and the Great Recession and changing of the workforce. So this is a big area to think about in our strategic plan, to look at 2023 and being able to recruit and update people with modern skills to work on these. We have a lot of technology projects and upgrading of technology that will require updated skills and people.
This is I know this is a budget conversation, but I mean, we got the executive director here, so I'm going to take the liberty to ask, which strategic relationships are we forming with the workforce or workforce developers like GNO Inc. or
You mean to create a pipeline of employees?
Yes.
We have limited relationship with a couple potential agencies. We've worked with Dillard in the past to help them with the curriculum. Just yesterday we talked to another agency relative to how we can bring interns into the field, just so they can start learning how, what possibilities lie, for them, so they can maybe go back and study accordingly.
Sure.
But beyond that, I don't know, we have on and off relationships with potential agents that could help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a civil service pay rate issue? I would imagine that's a big part of it.
The rates are dictated by civil service.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and so that's a big topic of conversation for the Flood Authority West, that, you know, obviously a much smaller organization, but similar percentage of vacancies. And, you know, it's
Similar
like,
skill sets too.
yeah, right. And so it's like, you know, who's going to take $11 an hour to sweat in the sun all day when they can make more than that at Starbucks or Target or something?
Yeah.
So,
Well,
so
our-
Nick's been talking to civil service a lot about, hey, we need to be able to pay these guys more. And I understand they've got a meeting this month where I think they're going to take that up, the civil service board. So I was just wondering if that, you know, if that would be part of the solution for the utility as well, to just be able to pay more. So is it at the lower scales where there's a lot of vacancies? Because
It's across the board. I
Yeah.
think we're first of all, just for correction, the minimum city wage is $15 an hour.
Right,
So-
yeah,
so
okay,
all
so
of,
y'all-
all of
y'all have
our,
that.
you know, like meter readers start at
Right.
15, and they have opportunities to obviously move.
yeah,
Through
the
other
flood
things.
authority doesn't have that, so we're straight civil service. Yeah, right.
But in some instances, when we have difficulty filling a position, we go to the civil service and requesting an flexibility or adjustment, allowing us to either go to mid level or mid, you know, in the range, because every position has a range of pay. I know the city's using incentives to hire people if they pass probationary periods, things like that. So there's some case by case basis that civil service can help, but we're having a hard time finding engineers, accountants. We've been looking for a comptroller for 2 years. You know, so it's just like everybody else, having a hard time finding
Yeah, sure.
quality workers.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the energy that we're spending on sort of workforce recruitment, particularly as a part of the strategic plan, is trying to do a better job of communicating like the total package. So it's not just that, you know, the wages maybe aren't as competitive as the private sector, but that we do offer a full pension. We
Right.
offer health insurance that's extremely competitive and very good. And so I think like trying to put together more materials that can show people what their total compensation is when you start to include the fringe benefits that you get
Right.
from working here, so that we can actually show that we are competitive, as long as pay isn't your only thing.
Sure.
So like particularly if you have a family, I mean, the health insurance is like second to none in terms of cost and coverage. So that could be a motivating factor versus taking a higher paying
Absolutely.
job with
For a
crappy health
20-year-old
insurance.
exiting college and
Not
into
so
the
much,
workforce,
but
you
yeah.
have to quantify that, right? Like
Yep.
pension.
Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I tell you what, I'm still coming to terms with that, because when I was late 20s and single and had a job that was covering all my premiums, it was zero that I was spending on there. Now with a family and a worse healthcare plan, I think I'm doing like $15,000 a year on medical expenses
Yep.
and premiums. So
Yeah.
that it definitely matters the difference. But yeah, like Otis said, that's you gotta be a particular person for that to matter.
Yep.
So.
Adds up. So the next slide, I think, is just getting into our capital budget program. So we're really trying to help our customer base understand, and something we talked about in the rate study, the significant deferral of capital projects that has occurred historically, and this is just talking about that challenge. You know, in some cases we spend money in our O&M budget because we haven't invested in a proper like a bulk chemical storage facility. It was an example of something that we truck chemicals multiple times a week because we don't have a storage facility. So that's a project on the list, and will ultimately and pay off with lower operating and maintenance expenses when we have a proper facility. So we continue to pursue all types of funding sources. We'll see on the next slide, I think, is just a recap of everything on our list. So our total capital budget uses is kind of the project list, the 517 million. Bottom right hand would be, we do our sort of wish list of projects of everything. We work with our engineers and general superintendent. And then we go through this matching exercise to have sources, because we need sources or a financing plan in order to actually move forward on the project. So that's the top half. We have several different programs. So maybe on the next slide, I'll just talk about it and then come back to this slide. That particular grid is a lot of kind of lingo that we use, but our major projects, you've heard about it, the power complex, for the resiliency for the drainage and combination of water and sewer to have the redundancy and power we need. Smart metering is kicking off, finishing up the contract to get started. And then the sewer repair and rehabilitation for our consent decree is a large project that is funded by our sewer bonds, state revolving funds, and the EPA loan that we closed last year with low interest rate loan. And then the fourth major project is the JIR program, but DPW is the prime, and we replace the utility water lines under streets that are being repaired. So that's continuing through a FEMA grant in 2023. The middle category is additional capital projects that either have been in existence, such as the hazard mitigation post-Katrina, in the latter stages of rehabilitating the Claiborne pumping station, which is almost done, and then the new Panola station funded by FEMA, new bulk chemical storage. We have a fair share, which is a source of revenue through the Infrastructure Advisory Board. We're counting on for that, and rehabilitating the water filter gallery. Some other smaller grants, and then on the wastewater treatment plants, we have a request in to do another state revolving fund, but it's a process. We submit an application to get on the intended use plan, and then if that funding or loan gets awarded, then we'd be able to move forward with that project for two different, for those people new in New Orleans, like you have plants on both sides of the river, you have wastewater treatment plants both sides of the river, so just getting the community to appreciate, the fact of operating kind of dual systems is costly. Lots of maintenance involved in new upgrading equipment. And then this last category is sort of everything else, which just has one funding source, meaning system funds, that we only have a limited amount of cash financing for the year for that 43 million figure. But if we look at major categories within water, wastewater, drainage, and then what we call combination projects, which might be your IT projects that benefit the whole system, or power projects, there's several projects that come up to these numbers, like 14 million for water plant pumping and intake is 20 different projects ranging from 100,000 to a $6 million renovation of the intake, bringing water from the Mississippi River. So those are all projects that are ready. Engineers would like to move forward, but we have to sort of use that only 43 million available budget what we can, and then continue to look for new sources. If we're not able to do it in 2023, we have to defer, we have to push things to the right. So that's sort of been the trend the last several years, and something we're trying to address through our rate study and just educating the community about, what does it mean to invest with a little bit more on the rate, so that we can actually do some more capital projects and invest in the system and get better services out to the community. So that's how we think, kind of break it up. So let's go back to the last slide. So all in all, the sources we identify, 440 million, are less than the total projects we'd like to do, the 517. So that means 76 million we would basically sit and defer until a financing source became available. So we can't appropriate, we can't move forward, appropriate it legally until that financing plan is in place.
I'm noticing capital outlay is not a source. Is that? Oh wait, no, there it is for West Power Complex. So we're kind of used up on capital outlay. Then it's all in West Power Complex.
Well, I think we have several levels of priority that are already in the queue. So I think we've been, they prioritize the capital outlay funding for like year one is priority 5 or however they number it. I don't know.
Right.
We already have requests in for the next several years that
Yeah,
are all
yeah.
sort of in the numbered queue. So no doubt in the coming years, those will start to move up in the priority list and we'll continue getting them.
Okay, I didn't see it on there until I asked the question and then immediately. saw
But
it.
for now, the focus is the
Sure,
the
yeah,
power complex.
yeah.
And I would say we're getting more than our fair share of the capital outlay funding in these years than we have in a long time. So
I would say we're getting what we deserve.
Right, you're now getting your fair share.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we just didn't have any for a really long time.
Yeah.
So
Greg, I don't understand your world, so I might ask one of 2 questions. One may be a stupid question to you, but I'm gonna ask it. I see the line items is government funding, bonds, but outside of bonds, would the current economic climate with interest rates, rising, would that affect your ability to go to your marketplace, whatever that is, grants or some fund, and get the money at affordable or cheap,
Well,
right? Low
interest rates are still relatively low, for our, but what we have to have bonding capacity, meaning enough rate revenue to pay back to meet the debt service. So it's more about having the ability to make the repayment. Interest rate, it has gone up, right? But that's the primary concern would be the ability to make the debt service.
My second question, and maybe I'm jumping ahead on your slides, but ARPA's funds, how does that affect the capital projects? I know it's one-time funding, but what is Sewage and Water Board getting out of that?
Yeah, so the city applied through ARPA, so they were the recipient, and so we're not a direct recipient of ARPA, but they're
The mayor has the ability to allocate how she
and they have, that's right, they have contributed to our power complex, through that.
The substation itself is supported by city funds.
Yeah.
The
That was
30.
funded before ARPA's, right? No? Okay. Thought it was 100% funded. Okay.
I mean, talks may have started before, but the commitment and the first installment of 50% of the 30 million was paid this year, and then the next one is coming in January,
Okay.
right? January,
Later
February.
next year. So
I'm gonna rehash an old question of mine, because I seem to remember when we started this committee, one of the things coming in the future was a master plan that was gonna be CapEx focused. And so I'm always curious, when you list out all the deferred projects, it's like, okay, we know what we want to do, and I'm always curious to know, is this future CapEx plan just going to detail that out further, or prioritize it more specifically? Or I mean, I would think that would be a very valuable thing to have, so that to just keep organized of funding pursuits, and okay, the next funding that comes in, we're going to do this project, or is
Yeah,
that,
the
so is that
rate
still in
study
the works, or
process-
does it really already exist, sort of? Or
in the rate study process, we the long-term capital planning outlook. So that's where we get more concrete with the matching of sources and uses and what can be done. So the study period is like 5 years looking forward to where we're matching resources and uses to show, and then that would tie into your master planning to be consistent, and then because currently we do this matching exercise on 2023, and then we show a 10-year, but it's really through the rate study, the 5-year study, where you're actually having to plan out, do the financial planning to show how you would pay for things, so that you can, I guess, suggest a rate that would allow you to do those things and form the basis for a rate study, adjustment if we want to invest in new things and improving existing assets.
so is that something that's going to be published with the rate study, or?
So the master plan has not been completed yet.
Right.
And the critical difference would be that this exercise that Gray's talking about is what we do now, which is sort of saying, what do we need to do? And so the engineers are saying, these are the projects that we know need to be done. And with the master planning process, it's more about sort of what can we do or what should we do?
Yeah.
And so it's less about what are our critical needs today in order to keep the system functioning, and more about what are the replacements and upgrades we can make to our systems to better serve our customers and better meet our operational needs.
So this 77 million is like,
That's the
what's
needed or
needed.
it breaks
Gotcha.
scenario. Whereas the master plan is more like, all right, if we know in year 5 we had to replace this sludge tank or whatever, what if we, instead of spending, $70 million to do that, we spend $100 million to completely rethink the whole process and
Right.
replace it all. And it's going to be more efficient, and it's going to give us, additional revenue and whatever. So that's the purpose of that process. It's similar, but also totally different in its sort of question that it's asking.
It will parallel what we did with power.
Yeah.
mhm.
Basically, rather than continue to spend money on
Yeah,
current,
yeah.
old equipment,
Yeah.
a total shift and investing in new and replace, right? So it may not be as simple, but that would be the same strategy. But then you have to have a clear picture of what that is.
Yeah.
That will substitute
Mm.
these kind of one at a time replacement or maintenance issues, right?
Yeah.
So you're wholesaling your approach.
Gotcha.
And with a modest increase in revenue will allow us to close a huge gap in what we envision versus what
Right.
we're bringing in.
Yeah.
Currently, we can dream all we want. We're not going to be able to accomplish any of what we need to accomplish in a systematic and preemptive way, proactive way.
Right. Yeah.
So if we have that modest increase, we'll be in that position to borrow money because we can now support the debt, and then just start in a very holistic way. Just,
Right. Doing like transformative projects with that big slug of
Right.
funding.
Yeah. Yeah, rather than kind of doing, sorry, just what Gray was alluding to, like, there may be this project that's like $14 million, but it's actually like 60 projects, and there could be $100,000, whatever. And so today we say, all right, fine, we'll bite off the 2 of the $100,000 chunks, and we'll push off the rest next year. Whereas if we had the capacity, then we could say, all right, actually, instead of doing even half of that, or even this whole 60 projects, maybe we just build a whole new system of bringing
Right.
water in that's going to be $60 million, but it's going to last for another 100 years, and it's going to be more efficient and
Right.
save us
Save
money
$1 million
in
a year,
operations
yeah.
and all of that.
replace a pump versus then fixing it, replace a water main, then repairing it. I mean, so you can apply that strategy across the board.
Sure.
But again, we need that security to be able, in terms of funding, enable for us to take that leap and start doing it.
That's kind of
That's
what
your
we
whole
have
presentation, right?
prepared as this financial stability is one of our strategic plan tactics. So it's certainly a great time to focus on this and just take any opportunity to educate our customers about our financial status. So.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, certainly. certainly.
It's very interactive, so I got a lot.
We got the 2 biggest talkers to show up anyway.
Appreciate y'all's time.
Well, feedback helps, right?
Yeah.
Because then we want you to understand what we're trying to do, and then us responding to, what did we miss, or how can we explain it better, or
All right. Well, like I said, we'll set a date for sometime in early January to do a virtual meeting, and we'll do our 2022 year in review then. Hopefully, we'll also have, some additional things we can share at that point, including starting to roll out the smart metering program and some other stuff. So that should be an exciting meeting, and otherwise, a great holiday.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Last meeting, we were talking about public meetings for
Yep.
the rate study.
Right.
Never saw anything, so
Right.
did they get pushed to the right a little bit?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
there was a general sentiment that, hey, slow down, let's get a couple things figured out first, so everything was pushed to the right.
Gotcha.
But we haven't abandoned our, at least attempt to educate the public and make clear that there's a discrepancy between our needs and our funding. Whether we get money or not, that's a question that's higher than our ability here today, but we have an obligation to tell the story, and we will tell it.
Yeah.
We're just slowing it down a little bit.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Probably
And
like
we
after
would hope that
Carnival.
you'll be there, present, hearing what we're hearing, maybe even helping at times, maybe facilitate, because the approach is we're gonna have a room full of folks who wanna interact with us, we're not gonna talk
Sure.
at people, we're gonna listen to them.
Well, I
So-
mean, I'd love to help facilitate through ASE, and I'm still new to the West Bank, but I'm happy to help on the West Bank as well.
Yeah, but, I mean, can you not see these gentlemen being at the table helping? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Because you know so much about our utility now, and then you have the willingness to help, right? So you can, with 10 people at a table, just
Yeah. Well, you had a closing question, so I'm gonna make a closing comment.
Yeah.
I think it's fitting. I haven't been fortunate yet to ride this train for 2 years. So I don't know if you had a meeting where engineers were involved. I would like to understand their maintenance on equipment, new and old equipment, and what strategies are they using? Are they reactive, preventative, or predictive on repairs? I just learned that in my business, so and
Okay.
I know it could be a huge cost saving on the life of equipment and parts or components. So
That's a great subject. I mean, I don't know if everybody else would be interested in that, but we're definitely making a huge shift in predicting. I mean, from like 2-3 years ago, only if it broke, you said,
Yep.
okay, yeah, let's fix it, versus now we're anticipating,
Sure.
we're maintaining,
Yeah.
and then we're conditioning our culture to take on the new modern, because it's gonna require maintenance to remain efficient. So you would hear our GSO talk about how he's shaping, our technicians,
Yeah.
and how he's changing the culture. So that'll be a very interesting conversation.
Who gave us the tour of DPS 6? Was it
CJ
6?
probably,
Yeah.
CJ?
Bernard James.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was super impressed with him.
Yeah,
You
he's
talk
great.
about culture,
Yeah.
and everything looked great to me. Like everything was like,
Yeah.
kept
He was, like,
clean and
complaining
clear,
it
and he
wasn't
was
clean
like,
enough.
"Oh,
Yeah.
this isn't clean enough." Like
Wow.
when I was one of the young guys, I was polishing this every day, and I'm like, "Man, this guy,
Yeah,
this
standards.
is like
right?
you need 100 of this guy."
Yeah,
you
for
know?
sure.
He was great.
If we could have 100 of them that were 20 years younger, that
Right, yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of back in my day.
Well, he's one who says, even when I started, those machines were old, and 40 years later, they're still there.
Right,
Same
yeah.
machines.
It's amazing, yeah.
So,
Thank you, gentlemen.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy holidays to you. And
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Yep, we'll see you. Merry Christmas. We'll see you